They won't even admit to this day the strategic value of something that's playing out before our eyes. And I think they're probably going to go to their grave. And I hope I'm wrong. And the door is open. I would love to talk to anybody about it. I would love to talk it through. But
I'm just curious. Just the answer or the question would be, what would have been the consequences in exchange for the rewards for the force the vote strategy? As in, had they gone through that, at best, they would have achieved that ceremonial vote. So we know that. We know what they could have achieved. So we know the best case scenario, if they won, they would have got the ceremonial vote and then it would have died. It would have been a DOA ceremonial vote. So that's the best case scenario. I'm just curious what they could have lost in exchange for that. We have a brand new Sam Seder conspiracy. Or maybe it's not Sam. I might have to change the title. I'm not entirely sure who was responsible, but revealed. Force the vote. Critics were ordered to oppose it.
Here with Americans comedian Kurt Metzger and our guest, Brianna Joy Gray, host of the podcast Bad Faith, co-host of The Hill TV's Rising, and host of the show on
Rumham 22. Thank you.
Brianna Joy Gray. So, critics of Force the Vote were very vocal back then in claiming that if Force the Vote happened, then Kevin McCarthy could become Speaker, and many other claims that they made to try to dissuade people from supporting Force the Vote. And one of them is,
I don't know, but Aaron always looks like he's ashamed of himself whenever he guest hosts. Well, I mean, Aaron Matei kind of has resting "I'm ashamed of myself" face. You know, that's kind of his whole persona. I imagine that comes with obviously having such an incredible father as he does, and then being one of the forefront conspiratorial, door associates on the internet.
Is this guy? He's the host of a show called The Middle-Aged McCarthyites. Really great show. I recommend it. And this is what he says.
Oh, sorry. No one really helped you out there. That's pretty mean. Here, this is going to be delayed, but we'll get a couple of those in for you. There you go. Nice.
Force the vote children amuse me. They think if you force a vote, you automatically win it. I originally supported the idea because progressives should use their leverage, but then I found out that they had no plan for who would be Speaker next or how to win the vote. #children. That's not what he said, though, at the time. At the time, he said this: for all people, and this is back in 2021 when this was going on, for all the people pushing Fraud Squad, do you understand that if all 10 Justice Democrats had voted present, GOP leader, which is McCarthy, would be Speaker right now? What would that have accomplished? Easy being destructive. You have to come up with a plan for being constructive. So what he was saying back then was that force the vote would have led to Kevin McCarthy being Speaker. Now he's saying that actually really, the progressives didn't have a plan for who else would be Speaker but Pelosi, and also didn't have a plan for winning the vote. That's why I opposed it then. And Bree, so, you've been on the receiving end of a lot of attacks for supporting force the vote. So what do you say to critics like this?
So for one, I mean, technically, if a bunch of Democrats voted present, that it's technically true, right? Because it lowers the threshold of total votes that are needed, and it could throw the vote. But the thing is, they should never do that. That's ridiculous. What Democrats are doing now is voting for an actual person. As long as you vote for another person,
the Republicans are voting now for
actually.
The Republicans.
Jeffries would have been the Speaker if the Freedom Caucus voted present. Correct.
Other people
for Jim Jordan and for Donald Trump, not voting
exactly.
President. Yeah.
So
I mean, that is a way to word it too, just to be like, technically he's right. Technically, yes. Like on its surface, that is actually an accurate statement. But
so long as you pick a guy, so long as you pick a person who isn't the Democrats person, you aren't at risk of actually throwing it to the minority party. So that was such an important talking point for the force the vote detractors back then. And the fact that that was their like most significant rebuttal, and it was a patent lie, revealed how bad faith the pushback really was. And I did a 3-hour, it was a really distressing time, but before force the vote.
But you just said it was correct. It wasn't a patent lie. It was technically correct. Technically correct is, I believe, your exact words.
A lot of people in the left community I consider to be real friends and allies. We had just come through the Bernie Sanders campaign. I was national press secretary. There was this sense of unity. People were reaching out, saying that they would do whatever they wanted to do to help. And maybe they weren't real friendships. Obviously, they weren't real friendships, but I felt a genuine sense of camaraderie with a lot of people in the left community. When the conversation around force the vote started, it shocked me how quickly people were unwilling to even hear what the idea was, or frankly understand the very basics of the kind of mechanics of it in the House, as evidenced by their misunderstanding of this issue. It's seemingly because of their personal animus for Jimmy Dore, who happened to be the first.
I will grant you, and this is in the best of faith, that yes, no question, hearing that an idea originates with Jimmy Dore is just pretty much poisoning the well pretty heavily in terms of like, well, has anyone else thought of this? But then it turns out other people have. Jimmy Dore didn't invent the concept of soft power. What Jimmy Dore kind of invented was, why don't we use this opportunity specifically to be able to prevent Nancy Pelosi from becoming Speaker of the House in order to get a ceremonial vote on Medicare for All. That way we will have a record of those who actually would vote for it and those who wouldn't, even though they knew it would be DOA. That was the concept. The concept, I think, was explained to me before I found out it was a Jimmy Dore idea specifically, like that exact combination of things. And at the time, I was interested to the point of, could there be more, or could there be something actually useful? Like, again, leveraging soft power in pursuit of what? Like, what do we get in exchange for the whole debacle? And again, not knowing how it would play out in real time, and now seeing how it played out in real time with the whole, Kevin McCarthy and his 15th vote, absolute dumpster fire that was the last couple days in U.S. government fiasco. Doing that purely for a ceremonial vote would have been seen as completely absurd and cartoonish. Like, I think anyone objectively at that point who had their questionable doubts about like how serious is the quote squad in terms of like, operating in government would have been like, oh, okay, so this is just a cartoon to you.
One to really latch onto this idea, but I actually heard it, ironically enough, watching Sam Seder's show. And knowing the acrimony that Sam Seder has for Jimmy Dore, I heard Sam Seder say it was a good idea. And I said, well, let me look more into this, because if Sam Seder is willing to say something that Jimmy Dore said it was a good idea, it must be really top notch. I looked into it. It seemed like an obviously a good idea. Crystal Ball, Kyle Kulinski, who founded Justice Democrats and was very disappointed in the behavior of the squad, also thought it was a good idea. Chris Hedges, Cornel West. There was a significant community of credible people who were behind them. However, the TYT and Minority Report universe, apparently based purely on their personal animus, refused to even know the basic facts of what was going on. And so a month after Force the Voter, so I think it was during February of that year, I wanted to reach out and try to put this community back together, to be honest. Like, I don't enjoy being at odds with all of these people. I don't have any personal issues with people, except for the ways in which they've launched personal attacks at me at this point. But I thought a constructive debate with Sam Seder for 3 hours on my show. It's still the most watched video over at Bad Faith Podcast.
And Virgil Texas was there too.
It really blew my mind that he knew he was going to prepare to debate me. He knew he was coming on the show. I had written an article in Current Affairs completely explaining my point of view in the argument. I had, already done a debate with Ben Burgess on Katie Halper's show. I had been on the Hill several times to talk about it. I had talked about it on my own show with Kyle Kulinski and Justin Jackson. I mean, my opinion and what the strategy was very much out there, even for people who didn't want to hear a word from Jimmy Dore. And the idea that he had the hubris to come on my show and like an hour and a half in, say Kevin McCarthy could become Speaker of the House and not realize what a patent lie that was, to be so ignorant, it blew my mind. But we worked through it. I thought we had a civil conversation. He basically admitted that the only reason he didn't like the idea was because of Jimmy Dore. And also he alluded to having received a phone call. I don't know from whom, but he alluded to having received a call about how it was a bad idea and that we should drop it. So
I watched that whole show. It wasn't that the only reason he thought it was a bad idea was Jimmy Dore. That's totally unfair. He actually goes into pretty in-depth details as to why he thought it was a bad idea. And the crux of it was, again, that it was going to be a ceremonial vote. It was going to be a vote that, yes, you could say people in the House got on record saying whether or not they would support a Medicare for All bill, and then knowing that it would die in the Senate, meaning that it actually wouldn't have much of an effect because people could vote on it even if they wanted to in bad faith, knowing that it wouldn't actually have a material effect whatsoever. So that was kind of the point. He did say that, like, he does not like Jimmy Dore and does not think that, just because it came from Jimmy Dore, people should follow the idea, but that wasn't the only reason.
Whatever was motivating him very obviously wasn't substantive and rooted in the reality of the plan. And unfortunately, because he and Cenk have such large audiences and have credibility with large portions of the left, so many people to this day believe that Kevin McCarthy could be Speaker of the House. The other thing they used to say, by the way, is Hakeem Jeffries would be Speaker of the House, and that somehow Hakeem Jeffries was worse than Nancy Pelosi. They said if they couldn't get the votes for Pelosi, they would just nominate Hakeem Jeffries, which also would not work if the squad doesn't vote for Hakeem Jeffries. They can still hold out. It doesn't matter who the person is. But the idea that you need a plan is obviously bunk. And one last thing that's worth noting: the same way all of the kind of established.
How is that bunk? You definitely need a plan. Like, if you just think that you can keep going randomly until something clicks, it's not going to work. That's not how deals are brokered in politics at that level.
Left figures kept saying, well, you don't have a plan. What's the next step? You need to have an alternate speaker. That's exactly what the Laura Ingrams and all of the establishment Republicans are saying right now. And guess what? These kooks that are doing this, they have no plan. They don't really want any other speaker. This is personal. They don't.
Oh, okay, so this is all starting to ring true. Yes, absolutely. In fact, like, when you look up what did Matt Gaetz actually do this for, or what were some of the reasons, or what did he achieve, like, there's allegedly a very personal reason why Matt Gaetz hates Kevin McCarthy so much. It took 4 days, 15 separate votes, and a lot of boredom for Kevin McCarthy to become the elected Speaker of the House. The holdup was due entirely to a motley crew of renegade Republicans who were adamant that the former minority leader not be promoted. Amongst them was Matt Gaetz, who went farther even than Lauren Boebert. He threatened to quit the chamber if McCarthy got the gig. But why does Gaetz despise him so much? The answer seems to be very personal. Rolling Stone spoke to multiple sources who addressed the very open secret of Gaetz' animosity towards the new Speaker of the House. According to them, it involves the 2-year federal investigation into Gaetz and his connection to a sex trafficking ring of minors, by the way. Gaetz has allegedly been furious at what he perceived as a lack of support from McCarthy as the investigation unfolded. That said, McCarthy was never punished Gaetz during the controversy, not even stripping him of any committee positions. No charges have been filed against Gaetz, but his own wingman, Joel Greenberg, was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Gaetz spent the last week publicly railing against McCarthy during the 14th vote, which was taking place Friday evening. McCarthy even confronted him on the House floor, though what they said was not clear to those watching it on C-SPAN. Gaetz was then confronted by another GOP lawmaker, Mike Rogers, who had to be physically restrained after the argument appeared to be instantly to grow heated. During the final vote that got McCarthy the job, Gaetz simply voted present. So, I mean, I think it's deeply unserious to look at this as an example of, like, you could have had all this could have been yours. Like, you could have had someone who, for very personal reasons, was basically upending this entire process, and eventually, what did he get for all of it? What were the great concessions that Matt Gaetz ended up voting present for, that he leveraged his power? Like, what did he achieve when he forced the vote? I saw what they were proposing publicly in press conferences that got them a lot of press and a lot of people on the other side being like, what? It's like, oh yeah, they actually demanded a reduction in the military budget. Look at that. They're outflanking everyone to the left. They're the only ones, the only anti-military industrial complex candidates now, you know, the anti-Semite, the child sex trafficker, the person whose husband flashed her when she was a minor. Like, all these people, look what they're doing. Look what they're achieving. But what did they get? Where's the big results in exchange for this entire process?
I don't care. But guess what? They got substantive concessions.
Yes.
Real life concessions. It matters. It works.
Is Cenk now for Kevin the Destroyer?
Pretty much. Pretty much. And that thing about the phone call is interesting. We can only speculate unless there's a public explanation, but it sounds to me as if somebody on Capitol Hill called their allies in media and said, knock this.
See, I love this. I love starting this part, you know, which is where the conspiracy comes in. Just starting it with, like, now, of course, we'll never truly know. It's going to be pure speculation at this point. Whatever we say from this moment is, again, anything we want. We can make up any single thing we want and now say it, and then it's going to be out there as a matter of potential fact. Yes, there may be some people who are seeing this live or other people later on who will run with it, but let's get it out there. Let's go.
Off, and instead of trying to advocate for what they initially thought was a good idea, which is force the vote, they went along. And I do think a lot of this has to do with their animus and bitterness and jealousy of Jimmy, but that's their business. That's their problem. But here's Jimmy responding to one of his haters, the host of the Middle-Aged McCarthyites. Reminder that Cenk switched.
Second go and it didn't get anything that time. Sorry, bro. I'll help you. Here, I'll give you the heavy applause. There you go. There you go. Yeah. Oh, wrong button. Sorry. There you go.
His lie from saying McCarthy would become speaker if the squad did what the right wing is currently doing. Exactly what we're discussing. And let's remember, look, squad member Ilhan Omar said this a few years ago. This is back in December 2020, as force the vote was happening. She kicked it to the next Congress. She said, yes, we can. With a slim Democratic majority in the next Congress, anything can be possible. It will literally take 5 courageous progressive members to get concessions on progressive policies.
Did that ever happen, if you will?
A squad, yes. Did that ever happen, Bree, as far as you know?
It didn't happen. It didn't happen. And look, I'm torn about this because I think that I would be justified in having some frustrations with the things that Cenk and some of the TYT people have said, kind of the personal attacks, all of that. But I did appreciate, Cenk had me on a few months ago, to talk about why he called me a fake leftist and to try to bury the hatchet somewhat. At least he was willing to dialogue about it. Unfortunately, these people still, I think, are so caught up in the emotionality of their personal issues that they won't even admit to this day the strategic value of something that's playing out before our eyes. And I think they're probably going to go to their grave. And I hope I'm wrong. And the door is open. I would love to talk to anybody about it. I would love to talk it through. But
I'm just curious. The answer, or the question would be, what would have been the consequences in exchange for the rewards for the force the vote strategy? As in, had they gone through that, at best, they would have achieved that ceremonial vote. So we know that. We know what they could have achieved. So we know the best case scenario, if they won, they would have got the ceremonial vote and then it would have died. It would have been a DOA ceremonial vote. So that's the best case scenario. I'm just curious what they could have lost in exchange for that. So what that would have cost, best case scenario, but what would the cost have been? And then the second one would be, what did Matt Gaetz get? So he has forced the vote. The force the vote has happened. The vote has been forced multiple times. 15 times, in fact. So on the 15th try, now, what did Matt Gaetz get in terms of a reward for everyone being like, well, this is utter clown shoes? Yeah.
I suspect that they were all going to go to their grave, ignoring Ilhan Omar's tweet, ignoring the success of what's happening right now for these 20 rogue Republicans, ignoring the fact that this was a DSA plan that Jimmy gleaned from their own materials, ignoring that this is like basic leverage 101, ignoring the fact that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin have literally been doing a version of this for the last 2 years and have single-handedly stymied Joe Biden's entire agenda, as crappy as it was to begin with. This obviously worked. And
well, what's the success?
I don't really know what to do or to go from here because it's just obvious. The proof is in the pudding, and the pudding.
Okay, so I'm a Canadian. I live in a made-up country, Canada. We're up north, and we have at this moment a government that is propped up by 2 factions. One, a liberal minority government led by Justin Trudeau. You've probably heard of him. And then there's the NDP led by Jagmeet Singh, who is propping up their government by giving them the necessary votes in Parliament, leveraging their soft power, if you will. And at any point, they could force a vote to have an election by doing a vote of no confidence, which would, of course, instantly trigger an election in Canada, because we wouldn't have a functional parliament. So, in exchange, Jagmeet Singh gets a list of things. For example, in order to prop up the Liberals last year, he wanted to have the first steps towards having a dental plan in Canada, as in a socialized dental plan. And so, as of right now, it's simply a bursary that is given to every single Canadian family who has 1 kid or 2 kids, and then a certain amount based on that, up to a certain age, under a certain income bracket. I think it's 200,000 or 150,000, something around there. But that is a concession. Trudeau would not have wanted to do that at all, but he has, exchange the ability to govern for Jagmeet using that soft power. Now, you can argue, certainly, in this case, Jagmeet's not getting enough. That perhaps it's not in the direction that you would want, that measures should go stronger, that you should have some more grit and actually shut down government in exchange for the potential of, well, if we did have an election right now, things don't actually look great for the Liberals in general. The Conservatives are still polling higher, even if their leader is polling very low. The Conservative Party is polling higher than the Liberals. So you could upend the entire way the government is currently structured, but you would be able to leverage that soft power. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? And it's a similar situation in that, yes, there is soft power being leveraged in another form of government. But when it comes to this situation, and I'm observing this as a Canadian, once again, using this as everyone's going to take this to their graves, what could have happened at this point in American history, the best case scenario is we would to this day have that ceremonial vote. You wouldn't have Medicare for all. You would have that ceremonial vote. What I don't know is what also would have happened in the opposite direction. whether government would have effectively been shut down for a long time, whether members of the squad would have been completely disgraced and unable to ever once again work within the Democratic Party at all. No brokering of deals, no even announcing, hey, how many other fellow members of the House can I get on board on this Green New Deal? It's like, no, you can go get fucked. That was just nonsense. Y'all are a bunch of kids. You don't know how to participate in the system that is here, but fun.
Is happening finally in a vote at 10 p.m. tonight, where it seems like Kevin McCarthy seems to think
Ilhan would have lost the nomination. Well, that's the biggest one that I don't think any of the forced to vote advocates really want to come to terms with. What do you think would have happened in the re-election cycles if everyone sitting back is like, oh, so those members of the squad, they all forced to vote and it went to, X number of votes. Who knows who would become the new speaker? Could be Hakeem Jeffries, for example. But they did that for a certain period of time and they got nothing in exchange. Like nothing. Like they got that ceremonial vote that we have no idea whether it's accurate about whether people care about Medicare for all, because people could vote yes knowing it would die in the Senate. So there is that.
that he finally has the votes after giving away the farm and significantly diminishing the power of the speaker. And I cannot in good conscience sit and laugh and cheer Kevin McCarthy's desk being pulled in and out of his office and the ambivalence about whether or not he gets to be speaker, like all these progressives seem to think it's a fun dog and pony show. I can't cheer that because I have the ghost memory in my brain, the memory that is not really real of Pelosi's desk being pulled in and out of her office, and what that would have meant and how exciting that would have meant, not just for the left, but for the 3/4 of Americans who wanted Nancy Pelosi to step down back in 2020 when we were pushing this force the vote stuff. The poll at that time, 3/4 of Americans didn't like Nancy Pelosi, wanted her to step down. And still people like Sam and Cenk were arguing that in the great media battle around this, that Nancy Pelosi was going to be too sympathetic a character and too beloved, and that it was going to be too much of a public image hit for the squad.
Everybody were doing live stand-up comedy in Los
Not 3/4 of Democrats. Those are called. Wait, was the poll she was referencing? It wasn't within the Democratic voting base. It was just within America, because then, yeah, that makes sense. I would count myself amongst them. I certainly was not a fan of Nancy Pelosi. Very, very happy not to see Nancy Pelosi around as much anymore. But yeah, it was that 75% of Democrats hated Pelosi. It included Republicans. I don't remember Sam saying that. Her Dem numbers were like 70%. She was massively popular. Okay. Because that makes more sense to me. If it's like, yeah, 3/4 of Americans wanted to see Nancy Pelosi out, I was like, well, yeah, you instantly get half, and then that would mean that half of the Democrats did not want it. At which point, then, yes, that would make more sense. That would play out.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demmel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojack, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.